Life is complex, so is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone. Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm always Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
All right, and today we have Leah Fischer back with us again today.
In fact, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Leah has a very specific area of practice that we'll let her talk about today, and really fitting in the reason why we chose the title. So for any of you that are familiar with that Dr. Gabor Mate, he is a Holocaust survivor. He was born and was about 3 months old in Hungary when the Nazi occupation occurred. And so in his books, he talks about the attachment impact that happened. And so the story is that his mom called the pediatrician saying, "Will you please come see Gabor? He's crying and he won't be comforted." And the pediatrician said, "Of course, I'll come see Gabor. Just know that all the Jewish babies are crying." And how were they to know? How were these little infants supposed to know what's happening in the world around them? They don't. They only know that their caregivers are terribly distressed. Because we have mirror neurons, and as a parent, we could at times do everything exactly right. But if there is major distressors in our life, then we're going to still radiate that distress, even though we're doing everything right. And so really setting this foundation to take away the idea of judging parents and to talk about the true aspects of how attachment is a foundation of our wellness. So did you want to go ahead and talk about this particular area of practice that you're specialized in? I think there's only 2 people that are specialized in this area of care in Medicine Hat.
Yes. In the if you're referring to the perinatal mental health, for sure, there's 2. I think that there's just 2 of us. But you said it. Attachment is the foundation. That's a phrase for all of us. We all start in the womb with one woman, who is surrounded by her own experiences. And if we look culturally at different experiences, the recognition of even just what the mom is experiencing impacts the baby right away. So yes, the attachment together is the foundation for us.
Yeah, and as you bring that up, for some reason, the image that flashed in my mind is just the image of the umbilical cord, where it's the baby is literally tied to the mother and knows the world around it only through the mother's nervous system.
Now, you used some particular words. You said perinatal, right? I'm not even sure if I said that right, but I think I did. If you wouldn't mind for our listeners describing what that actually means.
Sure. Actually, a lot of people, when I say it, say, I don't understand what that means, I think originally the awareness about maternal mental health started off with postpartum depression. But it's such a sliver of what a woman can experience in that whole process. So peri meaning many, and before, during, after, and natal obviously being the reflection of the time of the child's development in the mom and after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is across gestation and beyond. So I'm trying to help that person have that supportive environment so that they're not, we can't remove all stressors from life, but so that they're not experiencing distress.
Correct. Yeah. Some of the eustress is necessary to toughen us up, right? And just give us the experiences of learning of why we're here. But, the ones that cause us distress are not the ones that are going to be optimal for our growth. They stunt it.
In fact, I've got a bit of a story that I think might fit with this. During a time that I was working as a social work officer years ago, there was, and I'll be very cautious in sharing this to not breach anyone's confidence. It's just someone else that was an officer that I had contact with in another way. Usually we avoid dual relationships, but in a small situation like that, in that kind of environment, you can't entirely eliminate it. They had a baby, and she came in to see me saying, I have postpartum depression. And I went, well, hold on a second before we jump into exactly that. And I asked questions and like, what is the social supportive environment around you and so forth? And went, okay, well, given that you and your spouse are both military members and I'm a social worker inside the military, instead of us doing something to you, let's do something to the system. And I went, I think actually all you need is to sleep for a week. So let me go and, if I have permission, talk to the chain of command, and let's get time that your husband is with you. And she came back the next week, looked absolutely well, and was like, holy cow. It's like, I had no idea. Yeah, well, you're experiencing distress. The amount that you needed to take on is bigger than what you could do.
And right there, Jeremy, I think as I hear that, it kind of echoes for me the idea that as mental health professionals, we think that we need to have some of these elaborate interventions, but sometimes the simplest interventions and the ones that are most natural to the body will heal itself and knows what it needs. We just need to align with the biology of the mother and the child.
Yeah, in fact, even in a conversation we had this week, this conversation in which we realize or remember, we're not just therapists. That's a role. We're also social workers.
Mm-hmm.
And that means then we negotiate systems. And all of a sudden that left to a different process that wasn't about somehow changing something in the individual, but assisting them in their dynamic with an impossible system they were trying to negotiate.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so but coming back, that whole idea around postpartum being the starting point, also being seen instead of as a social ill, that causes social unwellness beyond just the person. It was also seen as a biological function, a biological truth that was inside the mom.
Yes, for sure. And Trent, I'll just speak to your thoughts about, an intervention. Which one have we been trained with that will work the best, and how will we, best serve this client? You know what, if we just pause and just take a wider look at things, women for eons have already known in different cultures that the first 40 days are magical for women, and they buffer them. I'm speaking specifically, I've read about, South American cultures and Asian cultures that just say for 40 days, all you do is heal.
Yeah, even the in southern Alberta, the German-speaking group, the Hutterites, have a similar process where it's like, your job right now is just to take care of this baby for the next month, and all of the rest of the community around them then supports them just to do that.
Yes, and if we can go, we've moved so far into an individualistic society in North America. It's done us a disservice for all the positive it might have brought. It's a disservice when we look at the beginnings of life, and the how the family can surround that beginning, that foundation of the mother and the child, really could start a ripple effect that is positive for everybody. And we don't have it. We don't, especially in a transient city that we have. Our family might be really far away, and we don't have that. We're doing it ourselves.
Absolutely. It makes me think of a quote that I read a while ago, where people think that they are their individual plants, but we forget that we're actually just leaves on the trees.
Ooh, I love that.
And it's curious because we're not saying that somehow we would remove all of the mental illness, all of the problems, if we were to do this. We know that that's not actually true. We're not actually even saying that. What we're saying is the amount of mental illness that people are experiencing now in Canada, by the time someone reaches 40, 50% of the population has experienced mental illness, and that is way off the hook. There has to be something wrong with society, not just with the individuals. The numbers being more reasonable, we won't eliminate them. We know that. But we can have a much more happy and healthy population and individuals in that population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, getting back to the basics, getting back to paying really strong attention to some of those specifics that you need when you are, what you need around you when you're pregnant, what you need after, during, and not just seeing it as a normal process and one that, it's like,
Yeah.
I look at it akin to like fast food service now. It's so
Sure.
normal. It just
Yeah.
kind of is rushed through, and you can't do that.
Or medicalized.
Medicalized.
Absolutely, yeah. It makes me think of years ago, I watched a documentary on the medicalization of birth. And one thing when they talked about that was back in the 1950s, they actually anesthetized, like where they actually put under anesthetic women when they were giving birth. And they talked about actually the negative impact on that and how that impacted the child and the mother, because you need certain releases of certain hormones and different things through that process. And while it may mitigate possible distress, you're actually undermining those natural processes that need to take place.
Yeah, thank goodness we learn as we grow and experience things, for sure. Yes, it has gotten much, much better. And the focus, like I said, is, that we've been given as a society to first start with the reactivity. Let's solve the problem. Now moving towards the preventative side and recognizing some of these red flags that we're seeing if we look backwards, and starting at the beginning is that's where it begins, and that's where I want to be too.
Yeah, like in a lot of ways, it feels like because we made so many advances in so many different areas, people used to die from shingles. They used to die from the flu. They used to die from pneumonia. They used to die from childbirth. And as the advances of Western medicine moved forward, then because there was so much advantage to it, that I think we lost some of our natural processes along the way, and didn't realize we were actually moving so far that we were actually missing the mark and causing harm. That a mom being surrounded by caring people that help lend their compassion to her, and she feels like she is safe and secure and held, so that she can relax into the process, and the oxytocin can occur, and the natural endorphins can occur, and then a baby that's not in distress because mom's not as much in distress, and they can make that initial connection. And
all those breaking down all those simple parts. I think if I can reflect, pulling out into a meso focus, we also need to start there. Like when I did my research, and for so long women didn't have the right to vote. Like, the most vulnerable are at the mercy of society. Women couldn't vote. They couldn't even speak about their own bodies and what was happening and how they were contributing to the whole. And it took 92 years later, 1917, they got the right to vote. 92 years later, before the government focused on what women were going through with postpartum and their experience.
Wow. And I mean, right there, too, like, I think about that in terms of intergenerational trauma and epigenetics and how that's been stored in that many generations of people.
2009. Can you believe that? That's when public health started to just track it, not even do something about it. Track.
Sure, and we're talking about Alberta numbers?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
No, excuse me, Canada.
Yeah. No, that's sad. I mean, really, because knowing healthy society, healthy moms are going to bring about a more healthy society. If we understood that, then all of our systems would be in support of that, because our jails would be less full, our hospitals would be less busy.
We would be seeing less people on our couches.
Yeah, we would be seeing less people on our couches. That's correct. We would too. I have a love seat though, so
yeah.
I don't have a couch.
Yeah, well, no, I just, we're in my
You have a
office.
couch.
Yeah.
Leah's sitting on your couch right now.
Yeah. So tell me how you feel. You know? Tell me about your relationship with your mother.
Yeah, tell me about your father.
Sorry, no. Ladies and gentlemen, that was my terrible impression of Freud. Feel free to, if you want to, go back, skip that, or, meme me or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. That's where it begins, and I'd be happy to work myself out of a job.
I think we all would.
Sure. Yeah. In fact, knowing that that's actually probably not possible. Where we're at in our world is one in which people will always need help, and yet we can, I think, diminish the severity and the intensity of how much distress and mental illness is occurring as we come to a place of understanding how we do so through connection.
Yeah, and I love that, Jeremy, because that you said that, because there are so many people that will say, well, we need to go back. And, or we need to go back to different things. And I think that it's about recovering that knowledge, but then also how do we move forward in that knowledge?
Yes. How do we take what has been lost and integrate it back into the whole so that we can move forward? Because I don't want to move backward anyway.
No. And I mean, the thing is that I literally sit before the both of you as an individual that wouldn't be here without modern technology, without the technology of 1987 to basically bring me into this world, even though, we can talk about the trauma that my mother experienced and that I experienced through my birth as well. Just because of that. And if you think about incubators, I know, did you ever do any studies on incubators and with human touch? Because if you actually think about it, my mother talked about when I was born, basically, you went there, it was a room full of incubators, all these different babies lined up. You went to your child and you basically weren't able to touch your child, but you had to do it through gloves. Of course, that was because they were underdeveloped, but think about how that then sets up the child's nervous system to then be in that room. It's necessary for medical technology, but then it's not taking into account the need for connection.
Yes, yeah, and you bring up the good example, Jeremy, about the children that all the Jewish babies were crying. They were crying because they didn't have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they tried to give them the food, the comfort in their beds, all of those basic things, but they cried because they had no attachment, no regulation, nothing to say physically to their nervous system, you're safe.
Yeah.
And I got you.
Sure. Because when the caregiver, who's supposed to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, is entirely distressed and doesn't feel secure, then how can the little infant feel secure?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're a little bit more of the Gabor expert than I am, Jeremy. With Gabor, did they not end up providing him with medication at that point to basically disassociate him?
Not as an infant. So as an infant, what happened is he ended up out of the care of his mother for a period of time. I think he was 3 months old, and there was a period of time he was out of her care. And then he talks about when they reconnected and his unwillingness, she wrote in a journal, and so he has all of these things she wrote as if she was writing to him, and her reflection was that as this baby came back to her, he wasn't willing to make eye contact.
Yeah, and eye contact is one of those things that is so vital, and you can even see that in adults. I don't know if you notice that when you're connecting with your clients, if they're willing to make eye contact with you, and then once they do, it's okay, I've got you, or you're willing to connect with me.
Well, and they can accept it. They feel safe enough.
Right.
There's so many that don't. They look away. They won't, they don't know the safety in your presence.
Yeah.
They have to feel that out. And, I don't know if you could, I loved your story. Thank you for sharing that. But I even wonder, at that time in 1987, were they more worried about infection and whatnot in being able to touch their baby in the incubator, or did they allow the moms to be able to connect with them even though they were in there?
Yeah, I think they were more worried about infection, and then, like, you can even talk about the people that were able to touch the child at the time were the nurses, but that was the medicalization of touch, and I mean, we can even talk about the medicalization of connection, even when we look at our own profession, where there's that dance of attunement that we go through, but then there's also the ethics and boundaries, which, of course, I'm not saying that they're not necessary. They absolutely are necessary. But it's like you have to also keep the human factor in mind there, too.
Yeah. In fact, this reminds me of another kind of guru in mental health. Dr. David Burns shares this experience. He shared it in a slightly different way. There was a different meaning that I took out of this. He was talking about rationalizing his thoughts, and it brought him to an action. That action was his son had just been born that day and was having problems breathing and was taken and was in an incubator. And his realization,
The microphones are cutting out.
his realization was that he needed to do something. He needed to be able to connect with his son. So he goes to the hospital, and he puts his hand inside the incubator, and he touches his son on the head, and he talks to him. And moments later, his son calms down and starts breathing. So, of course, for me, it was the connection that was absolutely needed for him.
Yes. Yeah. And if we could only, if we could have every, perfect situation for every mother and baby, that would be joyous. It can't, but the gift of humanism is that we're resilient, and that, David Burns recognizes just with the attunement that let's try something different. Let's do something different so that we have a better outcome and try it,
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, I find that actually really quite interesting because David Burns is sort of the guru of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is more about our thoughts. And so, like, if a gentleman that is really the head of looking at our thoughts can recognize how important connection and attachment is, that just speaks volumes from my point of view.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a bit ironic. You're right.
Yes.
In fact, even him telling the story was more about him working through the cognitions that led him to a different behavior. The different behavior was for him to connect. He didn't actually talk about that. That was a meaning I made. It was like, oh, and your little son, as he said, my son needs me, which was true. But it was actually that connection, and to say, is that a coincidence that he just started breathing after his dad came and spoke with him in a calm, soothing voice and didn't feel distressed anymore? Because he said that. He said, I fixed my distress, and I knew, and I had this motivation that my son needed me. And it's that internal attachment that I think made the bigger difference for his child. Mm-hmm.
Within the genre of maternal care, there's actually a book called The Art of Holding.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah, because it is such a component.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Sorry, I'm thinking about, again, like going back to just various other cultures and about how within our culture, like where you have like car seats or where children are facing out versus looking towards the attachment figure when they're walking. Whereas if you go into some African cultures or different ways of holding, like where they're in like I believe it's a papoose or something, like where they're actually looking up at the individual, and how that really impacts being held in that way, the attachment and the feeling of safety. Whereas within our society, we look out rather than looking within our own community.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a super fascinating conversation. And one of the things is, it always is interesting to me as we get into this, where it flows to. But I also wonder if you had any particular thoughts that you wanted to make sure were represented, that actually haven't been represented yet. Is there anything that sat there that you went, you know what, I think this is important, that I wanted to make sure was said?
You know, as an advocate for women and as an advocate for the perinatal period, there's so much I could say. I mean, this is my jam, and I could talk for a very long time about it. But I think just the attention that it needs. I mean, it's just a balancing of it. The needs of society are vast, right? There's a whole bunch of areas that we have to divide our attention to. But to me, and from my perspective, this is so foundational and has been just brushed aside. And I'm not saying it's the only thing that we need to attend to, but it's the first thing. Yeah,
I in my mind, I had this massive set of dominoes, you know, that spools out, and you see these things, and I thought, that's domino one.
It really is. It really is.
You touch that one to set off a cascade that will connect with a whole bunch of other things.
Absolutely. That, like, it made me think of, like, again, going back to trees. It's like, that is the initial root of the tree. We need to keep that root strong, to keep the base strong, and to keep growing as a society, and to keep those leaves healthy.
Yes. And I just want to also make a point that, you know, the mothers that are trying to implement this attachment have been through their own stuff.
Yeah.
And if they haven't had optimal development, they're already at a disadvantage. And they can't plant that seed as well as it could be planted. And so, you know, enveloping the mothers when they are going through this, or the birth person now, we're moving into different ways in our society, but if we can envelop them at this absolutely vulnerable stage and say, I got you. I got you. You're not doing it alone. And we'll figure it out as we go along. We increase the probability of the first domino being better.
Wellness. Yeah. Absolutely. And you know, it just reminded me of something a friend of mine said. So while that position in terms of supporting parents, and then I think the other side of the coin, in which he said to me, you know, maybe I need to give a little bit more compassion to my parents, because I realize, while they didn't give me some things that I really needed in my development, that there is some significant problems there. I think they really did do the best that they knew.
I think that speaking of development, I think when I got to a point in my life, it's like 35, 40, around there, 45. And when I had this, I think I got a bit of a reflection from somewhere, and they said, if your parents judge you as maybe harshly as you are judging them, how would you feel? So give everyone grace.
Sure.
They're doing the best they can. In the words of Maya Angelou, when I knew better, I did better.
Yeah. And it doesn't take someone off the hook for actions that they did or neglect that happened. That's not what it's about. It's just more about just creating a sense of understanding and how forgiveness can loosen the poison that might be in your heart.
Absolutely.
I love that. And you guys stole all the best lines, darn it. I don't have a reflection for the end. Yeah, I just want to say, you know, I think that's perfect to go out on. And Leah, I hope that, if we get good listenership, then maybe we have an opportunity to bring you back for part 2.
I would love it. I'm here whenever you want it.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I'm Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.